CuriosityStream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand on any device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. There sure are a lot of streaming services, aren't there? CuriosityStream is the one you definitely need if you're the type to nature dock and chill, if you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer physics to psychics, or perhaps you know a precocious paleontologist. Go to curiositystream.com to learn more and sign up today.
At Shell, we know from the time you get up to the time you wrap up,
good night,
there's a lot of meetups,
hey everyone,
eat-ups, and hurry-ups. So come to Shell and get 3 things done at once. Fill up with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus to help keep your engine running like new. Save up with the Fuel Rewards program and never pay full price for gas again. And snack up with in-store rewards to save even more at the pump. Make the most of the stop you need to make with Shell. And engines that continuously use Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. See full terms and conditions at fuelrewards.com.
Speaking of those practice fields, well, they have been basically fired up all over college football. And, of course, Ohio State getting an early start. The Buckeyes will travel to Minneapolis, Minnesota to take on P.J. Fleck, rowing that boat, and the Golden Gophers. Coming up on September the 2nd, Bill Landis covers the Buckeyes for The Athletic, joins us as he always does on the North Olmsted Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline. Bill, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
Are you in mid-season form yet? Are you still working yourself into shape? Where are you at right now, getting ready for this season coming up?
You know, I feel ready. I like the early opener. Like I like getting into it a few days early, so I felt ready for the last couple of days.
All right. Well, it's going to be what we hope anyway, a very long season. Now, real quick before we get into the roster and C.J. Stroud and all sorts of stuff, Big Ten kind of not a big surprise. Glad to hear it, but not a big surprise. Basically saying what as it relates to COVID-19 and following with the other conferences.
Yeah, it's in line with all the other conferences essentially. If you cannot play due to COVID-19 or not having enough players available, it goes down as a loss for you. It won't be rescheduled. If both teams can't play for that reason, it'll go down as no contest. The only thing we don't know is it was kind of strange. They released that, but then didn't say anything in the way of what those thresholds would be to trigger a forfeiture, to trigger you not being ready to play. And even, we've asked the Big Ten about that too, and we haven't got an answer yet. And I don't think Ohio State has an answer yet. So that's all up in the air, but if you can't play because of COVID, you're going to take a loss. It's not going to be a game that's rescheduled.
Ohio State has been kind of hush-hush on the numbers and who. Do you have any idea how, percentage-wise, how many are vaccinated? Are they even releasing that type of information?
They're not releasing hard numbers on it. I know Ryan Day said a couple weeks ago that they were at 90%, and then today he said they have about 10 players who have yet to be vaccinated. So there's probably 120 players in the roster when you count walk-ons. So 10 out of 120 is it's not. You look, I guess, to see everybody vaccinated if you're Ohio State because it helps you avoid any potential headaches. But I think it's still a pretty good spot to be in.
So, Bill, I don't think it was any big surprise. You've been writing about it. We know that there was, the quarterback competition. I think it very much was a competition with C.J. Stroud and Kyle McCord and Miller, and, of course, Quinn Ewers coming late. I think he's more in the mix next year. But not a huge surprise to hear Ryan Day say C.J. Stroud, but why C.J. Stroud to start September the 2nd?
I think it was a lot of things. Ryan Day harped on decision making a lot, and we don't get to see camp. We get to watch one full practice, but of course the one full practice we watched, CJ wasn't practicing, so we didn't even get a good feel really for what he was doing. But Ryan Day talked about decision making quite a bit, which I think makes sense, right? When you consider Kyle McCord's in that mix, and he probably has the talent to play quarterback right now at Ohio State, but it's about more than that. And just knowing what I know about Kyle, I can kind of see him maybe forcing the issue a little bit more than perhaps CJ would in practice. And I really think it was between those two guys when it came down to it in the end. And, CJ is a really talented passer in his own right. You talk to people who've worked with him, in high school or at the Elite 11 quarterback competition. They talk a lot about, one, his accuracy, which is really good, and his teammates talk about that, but also his anticipation, his ability to kind of see windows on the field, and he's a basketball player, so I think that maybe helps him, being kind of a former guard in basketball. I think he just has sort of that vision kind of innately part of him. And he's an athletic guy too. He can create plays. So he's got a pretty good package of skill sets there. Ryan Ryan Day did kind of go out of his way to remind everybody that it's not over, basically. Like, I guess he kind of left the door open for this to carry on throughout the year. But knowing what I know about how talented CJ is, I think I'd be surprised if he's not the guy all year, barring injury.
You wrote, and I saw your piece in The Athletic, we're talking to Bill Landis, covering the Buckeyes. You wrote about C.J. Stroud, and I want to talk more about that basketball stuff because I didn't really know that. And, one of the reasons maybe he wasn't as highly regarded as far as, the stars and stuff coming out, the stuff that Ari Wasserman, we know, pays attention.
That's right.
Is because, maybe because he did play both sports. He was very, very good as a point guard. And as you mentioned in the article, his high school coach thinks that has a lot to do with the anticipation thing. But he's a guy who, he doesn't really say a whole lot. And, that basketball thing probably, I don't want to say hurt him, but do you think that it would have it impacted a little bit as far as some of the bigger schools getting on board with him because he was playing at a high level of hoops as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose in the end he ended up in an okay place. But his recruiting process played out, pretty drastically different from the other recruiting processes of guys who were, by the end of his recruitment, he was a 5-star prospect by some services. So he was flying under the radar, but at the end of it, everyone knew who he was. And a lot of these quarterbacks specialize now. It's like kind of the only thing they do. Some of them play baseball, but most of them have their summers kind of freed up to kind of be full bore into quarterbacking and go to these private coaches and go to these camps and stuff. And CJ didn't really do any of that. On top of that, he didn't start in high school until he was a junior. He was actually in a competition as a freshman in high school out in Rancho Cucamonga, California, and he lost to a junior and kind of sat behind him and played JV for 2 years and then became the starter as a junior, and then was actually hurt a little bit his junior year. So his junior year stats weren't crazy. But then that summer, he got in front of the right people, went to the Elite 11 on the West Coast, earned an invite to the Nationals, and then ended up being, as a 3-star prospect at the time, he won the MVP of the Elite 11, which brings together the best, 20 or so quarterbacks across the country. So he always had it, and I think that's the sentiment that everyone who's known him for any number of years feels. That he's always had the talent. It's just a matter of the right people finding him, and then by the end they found him, and Ohio State got him.
How big of a deal is it when we see, nationally now with the transfer portal, it's like, well, I didn't get the starting job. All right, I'm out the door. Ohio State, I know it's Ohio State, but still that quarterback room, McCord, Miller, and Quinn Ewers, like if they don't have anyone enter the transfer portal, what does that say about Ryan Day? What does it say about Ohio State? What does it say about those kids if all 4 of them or the other 3 that didn't get it basically stay in there and say, I'm not going anywhere?
Yeah, I think it makes you think pretty highly of all of them, right? It's not. I'm sitting here on August 23rd. I'm surprised they have all those guys still. And
yeah.
If they would have lost one, I wouldn't have thought bad about whoever it was that left. I just think it's kind of the normality of the position now. When guys aren't starting, they leave. We've seen that at other programs. They name a starter, and then immediately the guy who didn't win goes into the portal. And to this point, it hasn't happened for Ohio State. It's not to say it won't happen, but we're 10 days away from the opener, and they still have all those guys in the room. So if they go into the season with that quarterback room that's going to have 3 5-star prospects and a kid and Jack Miller, who I think is pretty good in his own right and could start a lot of places right now, that's pretty crazy. I certainly did not expect that. I don't even know if you call it Ryan Day in an honest moment, if he would say he would expect that. So kudos to him, and then I think kudos to the players for kind of, embracing the development that Ohio State does, because I do think they developed the position well. When you think about it, at this point, I think it makes more sense to stay, because if you transfer, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to play wherever you go. Certainly not play right away with the season starting so soon. And in the meantime, you can be here, get developed by a good quarterback coach, and, you never know what's going to happen with the starter. There could be a chance for you to get on the field. So I think it makes sense to stay. I'm just a little bit surprised that it's happened. As
great as Chris Olave is, and he's incredible, obviously, but, he's the name you hear a lot about as far as, next year's mock draft in the NFL, he could be the first wide receiver. And that could very well happen. I feel like that Garrett Wilson, am I crazy to say that I think Garrett Wilson might be even more talented than Chris Olave, and that we're not really nationally, not a lot of people really realize just how great Garrett Wilson is?
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. And there are definitely some people who kind of follow the draft all year round who I think look at Garrett Wilson as a better pro prospect, or at least as a guy who's probably going to get drafted higher, because he has some of those athletic traits and probably testing numbers too that sort of jump off the page at you. And it's actually funny. I'm working on a story about Chris Olave now about, like, Chris is not that kind of guy. He's not, like, freaky athletic. He's got good long speed. He's pretty fast, but he's not out athleting people. He's just very savvy and technically proficient, and one of the best I've ever seen at doing that. That's why he's so good. Garrett Wilson has all that too, but he's also he can jump crazy high. He himself was a really good basketball player. Got great body control. I think he'll make more wow plays. So, in my opinion, they're neck and neck for, like, best two receivers in the country, or best receiver in the country. I don't know how much they're viewed that way nationally, because Chris Olave has kind of developed more of a household name. But Garrett Wilson is totally right there in terms of talent.
In terms of that backfield, I mean, Master Teague is the guy that, should be on paper the guy that, is the starter per se if you're going to put out a depth chart. But, I mean, at different points this year, you've written a lot about Mayan Williams. And then, by the way, Travion Henderson is like, that kid could be absolutely special, and Ryan Day has said it. So who do you think we see the most of right out of the gate September 2nd against Minnesota, Bill?
It's a good question. I'm curious myself to see kind of how much, because it's a road game at night, in front of fans for the first time in a long time, if Ryan Day just kind of goes with the most talented guys, even if they're younger and less experienced, or if he goes with the more experienced guys like Master Teague. I think he would lean more toward the former and play kind of the more explosive, dynamic guys, which would be obviously Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. So I don't know. I'm not quite ready to say yet that, like, Travion Henderson is going to run away with it and be a guy who gets 250 to 300 carries this year. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it will be kind of a 1A, 1B deal with he and Mayan Williams, and Master Teague works in there as well. But they've not been shy about the hype around Travion Henderson, which I appreciate, because I don't like when coaches do that when guys are clearly very good. So everyone in that program will tell you that Travion's special, and I think they believe strongly that he's going to show everyone that he's special right away. So he and Mayan together could form a pretty interesting 1-2 punch, because they are different. Mayan is lower to the ground. He's a powerful back, even though he's not super big, and Travion Henderson's got the kind of Saquon Barkley, J.K. Dobbins, make you miss kind of stuff. So it could be a really fun running game to watch, and I do think they're going to lean on it early on with a young quarterback.
One last thing on offense before we shift gears to the other side of the ball. The guys up front, man, this is a really, really good group. But one of the guys that has kind of made a lot of storylines in camp so far is DeJuan Jones. Is this guy, is he going to find himself in the starting lineup here, and they're going to have to shuffle things up a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I asked Ryan Day that today. I said, do you have your best five? Is that solidified? And he said it's pretty close. And then that best five would be DeJuan Jones at right tackle, Paris Johnson Jr. at right guard, Harry Miller at center, Thayer Munford moving from left tackle to left guard, and Nicholas Petit-Frere moving from right tackle to left tackle. So there's quite a bit of shuffling there. It's a little shocking to see Thayer Munford, who might be the best offensive tackle in college football, or at least best returning tackle in college football, moving inside now to get DeJuan Jones on the field. But DeJuan Jones has sort of been building toward this. He showed up at Ohio State as the 1,000th something ranked recruit. Like, nobody really thought anything of him other than he was gigantic, because he's like 6'8", 360 pounds, and I actually think he'd be taller than that. He's the biggest person I've ever seen in my life. But he can really move at that size. He's super athletic. Another guy who was a basketball player, would have played Division I basketball, like probably in the MAC or something like that, had he gone that route. So very athletic, gigantic, just a massive, massive human being. But when you talk about the right side of that line, especially with he and Paris Johnson Jr., who goes about 6'7", 315 pounds, that's a lot of man there for Travion Henderson or Mayan Williams or whoever it is to run behind. That'd be fun to watch.
All right, we'll let you go with this, and not that we're not going to spend much more time on the defense, but I think there was so much to talk there on the offensive side. This defense was much maligned last year. Now, many people will say, "Hey, wait a minute. Every program had a lot of catching up to do, and we're never quite in rhythm." How much of that last year's struggles do you attribute to COVID and what happened, and how much do you say, wow, we might need to change up some scheme? Or what's your take on the defense heading into this season?
I think I'm willing to give them a decent benefit of the doubt and pin a good deal of it on COVID, because they had a new coordinator, they had young players, especially in the back end of the defense, and they just never really got time to work on anything. And then the season itself was so weird with all the stops, and they just didn't have a lot of guys who were ready to play. So They're very excited about the back end of the defense, and especially the first and second year guys there who have made a move in this camp, and I think have really pushed for playing time. Guys like Denzel Burke and Legend Cavazos at corner, and Jansen Dunn at safety, Court Williams at that hybrid spot, Craig Young at that hybrid spot. So I think they are certainly much deeper than they were last year. Top end talent, I think the potential is there certainly to be better too. I think they'll be better up front. So I've had a lot of questions about this defense, and I'm really trying to reserve judgment until we see them on the field. But just the more you're around people, you get the sense of the confidence that's building with that group. And I think they could end up being pretty good this year, provided that Kerry Combs is kind of the right guy to be pushing the buttons and making the calls and making the game plan and stuff. I think that's still, to be seen. But talent-wise, I think they could be okay.
Bill, looking forward to your coverage all season long, and much like last year, would like to keep a regular visit from you, and hopefully we can do it next week, earlier in the week, obviously, with Ohio State opening up on that Thursday against Minnesota. Thanks for your time, buddy.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, that is Bill Landis from The Athletic. Interesting stuff there. How about the offensive line? Like, Thayer Munford really might be considered the best tackle. They're like, well, you know what? We're going to move you into guard because this DeJuan Jones, who's a monster, is looking so great. Like, wow. Those are, as they say, as we're saying now with the Browns, great problems to have. Yeah, you know what? We got this monster here that needs to play, and sorry, Thayer, we're going to move you inside the left guard. Unbelievable.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives. There is so much out there that we need to understand. But for every threat, there are heroes working at the edges of science and policy to protect us. I'm Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, former Detroit Health Director and host of Crooked Media's America Dissected. Every episode, I talk to the doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders who are working out new ways to protect us against our biggest threats. New episodes of America Dissected every Tuesday. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
On Pod Save the World, we want to be your cheat sheet for global events. My name is Tommy Vitor, and each week, my co-host Ben Rhodes and I break down the biggest stories from around the world. Ben and I both worked on President Obama's national security staff, and we'll introduce you to the activists, politicians, and journalists who can help us understand what's going on around the world, what it means for the United States, and what it's like being inside the White House Situation Room during a crisis.
Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods.
CuriosityStream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand on any device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. There sure are a lot of streaming services, aren't there? CuriosityStream is the one you definitely need if you're the type to nature doc and chill, if you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer physics to psychics, or perhaps you know a precocious paleontologist. Go to curiositystream.com to learn more and sign up today.